Episode 4, The Low Tide. Simon woke from a dream of rain. He'd been standing on the beach, the waves washing over his feet, the sky grey and low. And Margot had been there, standing beside him, looking out at the ocean with those kind, sad eyes. She'd turned to him, opened her mouth to speak, and then he was awake, the morning light streaming through the window, the shack quiet around him. He sat up, reached for the locket on the bedside table. It was warm, as it always was now, as if it held a pulse beneath its tarnished surface. He opened it, looked at Margot's face, and felt something shift in his chest. Not pain, not grief, something closer to recognition. He had spent the weeks since his visit to Phyllis reading everything he could about Margot Collins. There wasn't much: a birth certificate, a death certificate, a few mentions in local newspaper archives, but he had pieced together the shape of her life, the fisherman's daughter who never left, the woman who lived alone for 40 years, the quiet soul who baked bread and walked the beach and waited for something that never came. Or had it? He looked at the locket, at the bread that appeared on his table, at the notes in her handwriting. Something had come. Something was still here. He got up, dressed, and walked to the beach. The day was grey, the sky low, the ocean a churning mass of green and white. The wind was up, pulling at his clothes, throwing sand against his legs. He walked to the spot where he'd first seen her, where she'd appeared, solid and real, and then vanished, and stood there waiting. He didn't know what he was waiting for. He didn't know if she would come again. But he stood there, the locket in his hand, and he waited. The hours passed. The tide came in, the waves creeping up the beach, washing over his boots. He didn't move. The wind howled. The gulls cried. The sky darkened. And then, as the light began to fade, she appeared. She was standing at the water's edge, her back to him, her dress moving in the wind, the same floral dress, the same dark hair, the same impossible presence. She was real. She was there. Simon walked towards her, his heart pounding, his breath shallow, but he didn't stop. He walked until he was close enough to see the pattern on her dress, the small flowers faded and soft. He walked until he was close enough to hear her breathing, soft and steady, above the crash of the waves. She turned. Her eyes met his, and she smiled. "Hello, Simon," she said. Her voice was soft, warm, familiar, the same voice he'd heard in his headphones, singing that old song. "You're Margot," he said. It wasn't a question. "I am," she nodded. "You're dead." The words came out harsher than he intended, but she didn't flinch. She looked at him for a long moment, her kind, sad eyes holding his. "Time is strange here," she said. "It folds, it bends. When I was dying, I thought of him, the man who would come, the man who would need this place as much as I did. And my wanting, my waiting, it made a kind of door." "A door to what?" She looked out at the ocean, at the waves rolling in, endless and patient. "To when you needed it. I'm not alive, Simon, not any more. But this place remembers me, and when you found my locket, you opened the door from your side. You let me in." Simon stared at her. He wanted to argue, to demand a rational explanation, to fit into the world he understood. But he'd spent weeks in the shack, eating her bread, reading her notes, carrying her locket against his heart. He had stopped looking for rational explanations. He had started, instead, to believe. "Why me?" he asked. Why did you wait for me?" She looked at him with an expression he couldn't name, compassion perhaps, or recognition. "Because you're me." The same loneliness, the same guilt, the same belief that you failed someone you loved. I know that weight, Simon. I carried it for 40 years. I don't want you to carry it that long. He felt something crack inside him. That same crack that had formed in the boardroom. The one that had been spreading ever since. But this time, it didn't feel like breaking. It felt like opening. "I don't know how to put it down," he said, his voice breaking. She smiled, that shy, gentle smile he'd come to know from the photograph. "You already started. You stayed. You ate the bread. You asked my name. That's how it begins." She held out her hand. "Come with me, just for a while. See what it was like. See who I was before the guilt. It might help you remember who you were." Simon took her hand. He looked at the beach, the shack in the distance, the life he had run from and the life he was trying to find. He thought about Meg, about the deal, about all the ways he'd failed and all the ways he'd been failed. He thought about the weight he'd been carrying, the weight he thought he would carry forever. He took her hand. The world shimmered, the beach dissolved, the ocean blurred, and then as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. Simon opened his eyes. He was standing outside the shack, but it was different. The paint was fresh, a soft white. The porch was straight, the windows clean. A 1964 Ford was parked nearby, its blue paint gleaming in the afternoon sun. Music drifted from an open window, a woman's voice, young and sweet, singing along to the radio. He walked towards the window, his feet silent on the grass. He looked inside. Margot was in the kitchen dancing. She was young, alive, her dark hair swinging, her face bright with joy. She was baking bread, her hands dusted with flour, and she was singing along to the radio, her voice rising and falling with the melody. She was happy. She was free. She hadn't failed anyone yet. She hadn't been alone for 40 years yet. She was just a girl in a kitchen, baking bread and dancing. Simon stood at the window, watching her, and for the first time in years he smiled, a real smile, a crack in the armour.